Alright, so today we're doing example 3.4. No, 3.4 example 1. This is part A of example 1. Um, what we're supposed to do here is tell whether the triangles are similar and explain. To do that, we should use the key idea from the previous page, or from earlier on in the page. It You can scroll and hit previous on Canvas to read this, but it says it discusses angles of similar triangles, and it says when two angles in one triangle are congruent to two angles in another triangle, the third angles are also congruent and the triangles are similar. So, in essence, if we have two pairs of congruent angles between these two triangles, these third angles are congruent and the triangles are similar. So let's check these triangles out. Let's check. Okay, so we'll call this triangle 1. We'll call this triangle 2. Triangle 1 has a 50-degree angle and a 75-degree angle. Triangle 2 also has a 75-degree angle and a 50-degree angle, which means that we have this is a pair of congruent. This is a pair of angles, and this is a pair of angles, which means that x and y from the key idea before, x and y are congruent. So we have x equals y. And from that, we know that the two triangles are similar, and that is because of the two pairs of angles that are congruent. And since we derived that those were congruent, we know that the third angles are also equal to each other. Alright, let's do example B now. 1B. Let me grab it. I have the board drawn out. So we're supposed to do the same thing here. We're supposed to tell whether the triangles are similar and explain how we know that. Alright, so one way we can do this is do what we did initially last time. We check and see if we have two pairs of congruent angles. So we do have a pair here. We have 63 and 63. But the other two that we have aren't congruent. So we need to check and see if x and y. We need to check and see what x and y are to see if we have similar triangles. So let's set up an equation and solve it to find x here. So we know that earlier on in the chapter we learned that the interior angle sums of a triangle add up to be 180 degrees. So we're going to use that. So we know x plus 54 plus 63 equals 180 degrees. So all we need to do is simplify and solve. So we have x equals 54 plus 63 is 117 degrees. And then that still equals 180. We do is subtract 117 from both sides so we can get x by itself. And that leaves us with x equals 63 degrees. So we know that x is 63 degrees. And now let's compare our two triangles, triangle 1 and triangle 2, and see if we have two pairs of angles that are similar or that are congruent. So we've got 63, 63, and then 63 and 63. So we do have two pairs of angles that are congruent between the two. First pair is right here. Second pair is right here. From that, we know that the third angles here, this 54 degrees and this y, are congruent. So we know that y is 54 degrees. And we also now know that the two triangles are similar because of the two pairs of angles that we figured out initially. Okay, now let's move on to example C, 1C. One C. Alright. Tell whether the triangles are similar and explain. So we'll follow the same logic process as before. We have a 90-degree angle here and a 90-degree angle here. So we have one pair of congruent angles, but then we have a 42 and a 38. They're not the same, so we need to figure out what our x and y's are to see if we do have similar triangles. Oops. So let's write an equation out and solve it. Let's do this one. Let's do this triangle. Call it triangle one. This will be triangle two. Triangle one. So we remember we discussed before that the angle sums of the interior of this triangle add up to be 180 degrees. So let's use that. We have 90 plus 42 degrees plus x equals 180. So let's simplify, let's evaluate and solve. So we have 90 degrees plus 42 degrees. That's 132 degrees plus x equals 180 degrees. Then we subtract 132 from both sides to get x by itself. And then that gives us x equals 48 degrees. So we have x equals 48 degrees. I'm going to put that up here. 48. And we see that neither one of these angles are congruent to 38 degrees over here. So that makes it impossible for the two triangles to have two pairs of congruent angles, which means that these two triangles are not similar. Not similar. Whereas example A and example B for 1, those two were similar. Those two examples, let me put, so B, similar. And that is because they had two pairs of congruent angles. Let's write it on here, just to make it so it's clear what the answers were. Okay, so if you feel comfortable with this one, move on to the next slide and try the on your owns. But if you don't, I'd check the video out again, maybe read the key idea while we do the example. That might make it clearer for you. Otherwise, yeah, just move on, and we'll have example 2 ready for you in just a minute.